Good morning. On April 21st of this year, I completed the Boston Marathon. It was my 11th Boston Marathon finish and the 15th time finishing the 26.2-mile race. I say this not because it is pertinent to my talk today, but because I wanted to say at least one thing to impress you this morning. Okay, on to my talk. I could spend the next 15 minutes telling you stories from my time in a fiercely competitive, male-dominated industry. Stories that would make you laugh, maybe cry, but definitely gasp. I could talk about how I rose quickly and stumbled often. Sometimes because of my own mistakes, other times because the system was never really built for me to succeed. But today I feel a deeper urgency, an urgency to talk about something that's not just shaped my career, but my purpose. And I want to discuss with something you already have access to, something I didn't fully appreciate until I was deep in my career, the lasting transformational power of a liberal arts education. My story is about community, about opportunity, and about the connection between character, leadership, and empathy in our world today. Holy Cross taught me to be a seeker of truth, to remain open to different perspectives, to live a life of purpose, grounded in empathy. But it also taught me to think critically, to lead with integrity, and to navigate complexity in the real world. These are the very skills that help me survive and lead in high-stakes business environments. Now, back in the early 90s, there weren't many women majoring in economics, and even fewer who paired it with a concentration in peace and conflict studies. I like to think I was ahead of my time, a pioneer, if you will, or at least confusing to my academic advisors. That unlikely mix of markets and moral questions, systems and human stories, gave me a powerful lens with which to view the world. And more importantly, it gave me a professional edge. I didn't just understand how businesses worked, I understood how people within systems behaved and how real-world outcomes are shaped by ethics, empathy, and decision-making. And as it turns out, my education offered me a great retort when prospective employers asked me why my resume looked a little unconventional or eccentric at times. Why leave a fast-rising career in financial services to work for a nonprofit at the intersection of public health and climate, they would ask. Well, I would say, may I direct your attention to my liberal arts education at Holy Cross, where I studied how drought and disease aren't just environmental issues, but catalysts for conflict, and how the most complex problems require human-centered solutions. That explanation almost always got me the job. Leaving high-paying, prominent jobs for much less less lucrative jobs didn't always amuse and impress my brothers. They thought I was crazy the first time I did it. But my best friend, Carrie Ann Sullivan, class of '95, was never surprised by my non-conventional moves. It's in your human design, she would tell me. Carrie's lived in Los Angeles for quite some time. But importantly, and here's some very valuable career advice, my husband, Rob Clifford, class of 2005, has been my biggest supporter in any move I have made. So choose wisely when choosing a life partner. Now back to my economics and peace and conflict focus. That foundation didn't just make my choices make sense, it made my work meaningful. It gave me the tools to adapt, to lead, and to make value-driven decisions in industries that didn't always reward them. But today, with your permission, and to honor this unique perspective my Holy Cross education gave me, I'd like to break with CrossTalk tradition and read you a letter I recently wrote to my 10-year-old son, Bobby. It captures what I've learned and what I hope to pass on. It's a reflection of the world he's growing up in, and one where I hope he will actively be a person for others, where he's invited to think critically, participate in ethical reflection, see the historical context, and be committed to the common good. So now I'm going to read you my letter. Dear Bobby, remember when you scored that game-winning goal in overtime in the championship hockey game? This is how you get the attention of a 10-year-old boy. The joy on your face wasn't just because you scored. It was because your teammates and their families were so happy too. That's the joy of community. Your dad and I felt the same joy when your first grade teacher, Miss McCarthy, told us she'd never met a 6-year-old with such a strong sense of justice. The high-fiving that ensued after that parent-teacher conference was significant. You've always had that spark, the desire to ask, to know why, Maybe it's the early exposure. You'd already been to 3 protests by the time you were 6. I can still hear your little voice chanting, "Let them in, let them in." We were standing up for people we didn't know, people being turned away not because of what they'd done, but because who they were. That, Bobby, is what it means to live with compassion and intention. To care for others not just because it's your responsibility, but because it's the right thing to do. Jesus stood with the vulnerable. He welcomed the stranger. He made others feel seen. Never forget, he was also a refugee. Every person deserves dignity, especially those who are overlooked or struggling, no matter where they were born. Now let's talk a little bit about privilege and how it isn't a shame or a badge of honor. It's a responsibility. You're growing up with enormous advantages, financial, educational, social. That's something to be aware of. You'll hear people say, success comes to those who work hard. And sometimes that's true, but it's not the whole truth. Not everyone starts in the same place, and life isn't always fair. That doesn't mean people aren't trying. It means we should approach others with understanding and grace. I didn't have the financial advantages you have today. I was a work-study student, often held down multiple jobs during the week, plus working on the weekends, all while playing a varsity sport or 2. I did whatever it took to cover my tuition each semester. I actually learned some of my best negotiating skills from talking the bursar's office into letting me register for classes before the check had cleared. So when someone says, they just need to work harder, I want you to pause and ask, might they be facing barriers I can't see? Because awareness starts with listening. That's also what liberal arts taught me, to ask better questions, to seek understanding, to lead with context, not assumptions. Remember when you thought only girls could be doctors or basketball coaches? Getting his attention again. That's because you were surrounded by strong women doing both. Your Auntie Vit, Catherine Clifford, Holy Cross class of 2009, coached the high school basketball team, and you were a great team mascot. At the same time, our all-women's medical practice, started by Kathleen Fitzgerald, Holy Cross class of 1982, was all you knew of leadership in medicine. But now you're older, and you're seeing how the world often treats women differently and unfairly. When I was promoted at one of my jobs in financial services, I hired a man to fill my old role. I soon found out he was being paid significantly more than I had been and would be, even as his boss. Why? I asked my boss at the time. And he said it was because he was older and had a family to support. Well, so did I. Moments like that taught me how important fairness and advocacy are in leadership, and how good leaders speak up when something isn't right. So let that guide you how you treat others. We need people who lift others up, who listen more than they speak, and who choose to lead with character. Some will tell you that someone else's success threatens you. That's a lie. Opportunity is not a limited pie. The best leaders create opportunities for others. They don't compete out of fear, they collaborate from strength. Throughout my career, I often found myself as one of the only women at the table. So I made it my mission to bring other women with me. And when they weren't in the room, I made sure to speak their names and highlight their talents so the other people at the table would take notice. But not everyone shared that mindset. I also encountered women who believed there were only so many seats for us, who saw other women as competition, not as allies. Some even felt, because they had struggled, others should have to struggle too. That kind of scarcity of thinking still exists today, and it's just as damaging now. Even with the progress we've made in creating more inclusive workplaces, there are still challenges. Often it comes down to the mistaken idea that opportunity is a finite resource, that helping others succeed somehow takes away from our own success, or that those who didn't start from a place of advantage are somehow less qualified. We must rethink that mindset. Not only is it inaccurate, it holds all of us back, it limits growth, undermines our economy, and stifles the potential we have as a community. That expensive new baseball bat you got from Uncle Mike? Some of your classmates' parents don't make that much money in a week. That's economic privilege. But here's an even deeper one. You can walk into a store without being followed. You can speak your mind and be seen as confident, not threatening. You can fail and you'll get a second chance. That's real privilege. So the question is, Bobby, what will you do with it? When the time comes for you to choose your own path, how you spend your energy, your talent, and your work life, I hope you'll choose to do it in service of something greater than yourself. Whether it's your community, a cause, or simply lifting others up, that's where real purpose lives. In the end, Bobby, The true strength of a society is measured not by the success of the strongest, but by how we care for the most vulnerable. A healthy society lifts everyone, especially those in need. That is the truth. Love always, Mom. So I share this letter with you not because my son is special, because he's not. Well, I think he is, but you know what I mean. And neither are any of us. We are each born into a web of circumstances that we don't choose. But how we choose to respond, how we lead, and how we serve, we can choose. And that's where your liberal arts education becomes your superpower. It doesn't just prepare you to earn a living, it prepares you to make a life. One rooted in discernment, in empathy, and in responsibility. So may we all seek truth with courage, use privilege with humility, and build the kind of community where everyone, not just a few, can thrive. Thank you.